Good evening, everyone. I welcome us all back. Yesterday was actually, I was a little bit carried away. I lost track of time because of the extent of what we are looking at achieving. But today, please, if I overstretch it, always call me back to order, because the essence of this training is not just for us to come and while away the time here, but for us to actually make impacts. That's why we're doing it the way we're doing it. For the people that were in attendance yesterday, we brushed through a lot of things. First, we introduced the topic and why it was very necessary for us to be talking about construction data analysis. Then we went through to discuss some types of construction data, their possible sources around us, because sometimes if you're calling, if you're talking about something and you don't have maybe samples or examples of such thing around you, it might be difficult for somebody to actually grasp it and know that this is what we are discussing or what we're talking about. So that yesterday we tried to go through some of the types of construction data that we have, which are construction data itself, the data that I generate from construction activities particularly. And then we also have project data, the data that are very unique to each project particularly. It might be useful in another project, but most likely it is most useful in a particular project that you have done or executed. We talk about estimating data, and we'll talk about financial data. So in the course of today's discussion, we will look at estimating data that will influence your estimates. And we'll also look at financial data, some of the data that will also influence your estimates. They are of a financial nature. We mentioned one of them yesterday, which actually arises from your project data. And by project data, I mean a data like the one that will be given to you in the course of your project. Say when you have a tender document like this one I have. Inside this tender document, there will be some specifications, some requirements that you need to comply with. And some of them might be of a cost, they may be cost intensive in the sense that you need to actually assign cost to them. And when you don't do that, you will be shooting yourself on the foot, thereby reducing your profits. Also, we'll also talk about some of the data that you can also use to reflect on your estimating, which is basically what we'll be looking at today. And when we'll do that, we'll also move over to another aspect, which is the cash flow. I know I got a lot of reactions this morning when we try to, kickstart a conversation regarding the cash flow. And it surprises me that a good number of us don't know about the book posted. It's not my book, it's Dr. Ejike's book. Late Dr. Ejike's book. This book, it was released in 2016. But believe you me, this book was actually cooked for a far longer period of time, for almost 5 to 10 years before it was actually published in 2016. And before Dr. Ejike's death, we're already working on how to improve the content of the book in the way of revision. And we're looking at bringing in some of the aspects that we have been talking about, talk about technology, talk about BIM, talk about some of these new concepts that are all around us today. Those were the things that we're intending to bring in to make the book unique and a practice manual for quantity surveyors. But death came at the right time and took him away. So I encourage you, like I said earlier today, I encourage you to go and pick up this book. If at the end of this class today, when we talk about cash flow, you're not able to pick some of the things that I will be discussing, you can also go get the book and look at the books and see some of the examples and explanations that I provided in that book as at that time, 2016. Even though most of the explanations I gave there might be a little bit difficult for you to understand, because by now I have more simpler ways, simpler scenarios and demonstrations that we can actually use to talk about it today. So that's it for the book. All right. I will get back to where we are today. Like I said, we discussed about some of the sources of sources of construction data that we have around us. Talk about data that are around construction companies, labor or trade organizations, the ones that are coming from government agencies, and then from construction documents. Our estimating data, most of them are coming from construction market information. Like when you go to the market, you get what is the price of the going price of chipping today? What is the price of bitumen? What is the price of those? Those are construction data that are coming mostly for your from the construction market information that you have. Then also we have some of the information that are also coming from construction bodies. In the course of my presentation yesterday, I particularly mentioned about FOSI, which is an organization of constructing companies in Nigeria. They have more like a database that they are leveraging on. And as it stands now, one way or another, the construction activities in Nigeria now is beginning to adopt those informations there. So, which is a big thumbs up for them. They are going places. Very soon, it might be something reliable like the way you have in the UK, the way you have your BCIS, something like that. All those cost informations and the rest of them. Similarly, also we have professional associations and bodies and all those. There were some data that were being published some time ago. The ones that were being published by Consol and Coscience and the rest of them. Those information were also very useful and helpful, especially in running your estimatings and rest of them. When you want a quick estimate of something, you can easily use them as a go-to, pick it up, and then run your updates on the basic price that were established there. And then you're good to fly. Forgive me, I'm just trying to run through what we talked about yesterday before we brush through all of them so that we'll get to where we are today. We'll continue. Then we also explored some of the sources of data that we have around us. And this is where we spend most of our times because we are trying to establish that for every construction data that you have, the beginning point of every construction data remains when you are bidding for a project. And the last point of it remains when you have just completed a project. The messages or information that the lessons learned, that is the last stage of it. But in between the beginning and the end, you will always continue to reverse them or go back and forth in between them to leverage on the information that has been provided. So that is what we're talking about here. We try to look at it, some of the aspects that we'll see when we are talking about tender documents. And I directed our attention that when you see most of those informations will be on your instructions to the bidders, or like some documents will call it instruction to tenderers. Then particularly you have to focus on bid data sheets. All right. On the bid data sheet. And under the bid data sheet, you also find some peculiarities that have been designed to influence the project. That is when you're talking about your construction, your project data itself. This bid data sheet is all about your project data. So another thing I actually called attention to was the data that we receive from the contract document itself. And there is actually a big difference between tender document and contract documents. Most likely the differences will be on tender documents are always actually talking about the documents that guides your preparations towards tender. Whereas the contract documents are actually talking about preparations towards delivering the project. All right. It will guide you the processes, the obligations, the responsibilities of parties in achieving the goal of the project. We have another one that we talked about, which is contracting organizations. Information that come from contracting organizations, and like the one I mentioned, FOSI. Some of those informations, those data, those indices that FOSI is publishing will actually be coming out from past experiences or past projects. And then from those past experiences, they're actually coming from when you update those past experiences, either by way of trying to update them based on indices of what is happening, and you actually be having your actual data of what is supposed to be. And most oftentimes, the past experiences might not be the real thing. You need to do some updates. Like we will try to simulate a typical approach to that this evening. Then we have the ones that we talk about that come from your equipment. And suffice to say that it's not only equipment that is supposed to be here. We're also supposed to have the ones that come from labor organizations. since we're not talking about construction resources. So the ones that come from equipment most likely will be coming in form of performance data. Performance data will be giving you the ratings, the capacities, and the operation manuals for the equipment that you're working on, as well as those things that will not define what will be the production capacity or production data that you'll be using for your estimating. We have another line of them, which is also coming from manufacturers' information. And this manufacturer's information may not only be limited to materials alone, can actually include some things like equipment that you have to, bring in on the project that will become part of the finished project. So, and of course, there are specifications that has to guide them, and those specifications will be relating to standards that have been established. And finally, that we have on our list this evening is government agencies, which some of their rules, we are getting them from regulations and requirements. We talked about one of these yesterday, whereby I introduced to us, maybe because it was obvious that a good number of us don't know that VAT for construction activity is actually 2.5% now. So these are some of the things that we covered yesterday. And from this very point, we moved on to trying to look at some of those data. So to continue from where we left off yesterday, I will bring us back into our Excel, the Excel file that we're using yesterday. And that should be our construction data. Remember yesterday when we are talking about a typical project, your typical project starts from you bidding for a job. And one of the templates that you use to bid for your job to achieve competitiveness is your bill of quantity, which is a standard that everybody has to comply with. And I try to show us how we actually price that bill of quantity, considering all the factors that we need to consider. In this example, I may not go back to what we talked about yesterday. You can always go back to the videos and rewatch over and over again to get the information and the message. But for us, we'll be continuing from where we left off yesterday, because I want us to talk about something else, which is under the line of cost projection. First, we talked about you when you're working on a fresh project, you have a fresh bill, you have a new project, and how you can be able to price it effectively and come up with the cost. But today, we'll be talking about how you can be able to leverage on past informations to cost a project. You're not going to be starting afresh to start preparing your rates, your amounts, and the rest of them. Rather, you will be basing your judgment on the prevailing economic circumstance as at that time and the prevailing economic circumstance as at today to be able to relate the two of them. That is what I call cost projection. Cost projection. By that cost projection, what I mean is this. I have a new project, let's say construction of 3-span bridge. Forgive me if I use more of infrastructural projects than building projects. That's actually my background. 3-span bridge. We wanted to build it in this year, 2023. But it happens to be that we don't have no time constraint. One of our first constraint is time to actually price the project properly. And the second constraint that we have is maybe on availability of information. And by this information, I mean cost information. Talk about quotations from our subcontractors and the rest of them. Now, you can actually have as many constraints as possible that will make you not to go ahead and start pricing your project from the beginning. Instead, you want to price them on the fly based on past projects that you have in the past. And this is supposed to be in 2005. In 2000, let me use this word 2010 so that it doesn't become, because within 2005 and today, the effect of inflations and other things that have taken over in our economy actually vary too much. So let me bring it up a little bit up to 2010 or thereabouts. So if I have a project that we executed in a project that we want to execute in 2023, but we have a similar project that was executed. It was executed in 2015. And because of time, we just want to see how fast we can be able to get the same information. Maybe we're not really working on the detailed estimate for now. We want to work on the preliminary cost of these projects. We don't have time, and the informations are just quite sketchy. We cannot be able to present a detailed cost estimate of the project. One of such ways that we can always use is to use cost indices. And by cost indices now, what we'll be looking at is the differences or the variation between the base costs and the current costs in the economy. Some people might be asking, what is a base cost and what is the current cost? By base cost, I mean the prevailing economic situation as at that time, in this case here, 2015, and the current economic situation as at now, in this case, 2023. On our own, and as quantity surveyors in our offices, we might not easily have these information available to us. But there are established sources where you can leverage on to access this information. And for us in Nigeria, one of such source is your MBS, which is the National Bureau of Statistics. Their mandate is to establish data that are verifiable, data that stand the test of time, real data that you can actually depend on and count on. And I provided some websites so that let's go there so that we'll look at what we have there. Let's see what we have there. Now, what I have here is when you first come to this the National Bureau of Statistics, this is basically what you will see. And the information that is here is actually what is happening in Nigeria. Particularly where I want to call your attention to is on this place, which is called CPI. And CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. This is what some people call inflation rates. Okay? Consumer Price Index. The higher the number, the higher the inflation that you have in an economy. And the lesser the number, the lesser the inflation that you have in an economy. There are also other indices that are here. Even here, presently, you can actually see that there is, even the prices of some of the products that you have around are here. Gross domestic products are here. So many organizations are leveraging on the information that are here. They are tapping from these data that you have, these volumes of data that you have here. And they are using them to achieve a lot of things, cost projections and the rest of them. So for us, quantity surveyors, constantly, we always have to be leveraging on some of these informations that are available. When we start talking about information that has to do with exchange rates, we'll shift away from this MPS and start going to CBN, because that is where you find verifiable and reliable information. They are the organizations that have the statutory mandates to publish such kind of information that everybody will stand by it. The nation will stand by it. All right? So when we come down here, our major focus is when you come down to the library that you have, e-library. This is where you come to see different documents that you need to take. And our major concern always at every point in time is this one that says CPI and inflation report for July 2023. In fact, every month, on a monthly basis, they are always updating this information because they are tracking the inflation rates in Nigerian economy on a monthly basis. So this figure that you see here constantly is always changing. Now, let me go ahead to try to download this so that we'll look at it and be able to explore a little bit. When I click to download it, it will now bring me to the portal where I will download this information. And it's always very good practice for you to at least look at this information that is here. What it's telling you is more like a summary of what you're about to pick. He said in July 2023, the headline inflation rate rose to 24.08% relative to June 2023 headline inflation, which was 22 points. That is to say that if for any reason you did a project in June and you want to do another similar project also in July, the differences in 22.79% and 24.08% is what you should be applying in your project costs because of the window period that you are doing your estimating or your projection. In this case, now we're looking at between June and July. And the difference between the two of them is 22.79% and 24.08%. All right. Now, looking at the movement, the 2023 headline inflation rate showed an increase of 1.29% points. Now, this is where you need to, the thing I was trying to explain to you. So if you did a project in June and you want to do a similar project again in July, it simply means that whatever it costs you to do that same project in June, it will now cost you an additional 1.29% of that in July. That is what this thing simply means. But for us, we'll just go ahead and try to download this report. Let's look at it in-depthly. I already have a sample of that report, but I will use a different means to get that report. I will use a different means to get that report. And I just wish that you would just be patient enough with me and follow alongside. If you have any question at every point in time, please, the question and answers place is there. Go to the chat box, drop your questions. I will be attending to them as we are progressing, because we want this section to be as interactive as possible. All right. So I have a question here. He said, thank you so much, Bamidele. You're welcome. So let me see if the download has concluded so that we can open it up. Now it has concluded. Let me open it now. Now, this is that document which you have just downloaded. But a good number of this information may not be relevant in what you're doing, except maybe you are a financial guy and you have need for any of them. It's always good practice for you to go through them to understand them. But for me, having gone through them in the past, I actually have my focus, which is where I'm rushing down to. Okay? And that my focus is on this angle, which is on the inflation and the CPI. There is a table where the whole thing is now summarized. These are just for people. The infographics are for people to give you a direct pointer. You don't have to waste time skipping through it. That's the essence of the infographics. But for me, I am not just looking at only 1 month. I am looking at taking as much information as possible, because I will be working over a long period of time and I need to aggregate informations. Typically, when you look at this and now look at this is all items inflation that you have here for combined urban and rural states CPI July 2023. It simply means that as at this year on year, what you mean by year on year means that as at this time last year, then as at this time this year, in Kogi State, inflation rose by about 28.45%. In Borno State, which is the lowest, they actually brought out the 3 highest and the 3 lowest. So it simply means that if I am bidding for a job as in this time, within this period, I bidded for the same job last year, even though that inflation has actually increased generally all over the country, relatively to my local environment, which is Borno State, it did not increase as much as it increased all over Nigeria, the aggregate for all over Nigeria. Because from the document that we read, the analysis that we read in the front, it says that the total inflation within the year, within the month between June and this year is about 24% But the year on year is telling me that it's about 20.71% that has increased so far. So it's always very good that you should at least try to have a better understanding of some of these things. Because when you are talking about doing preliminary cost estimates, you most likely will be leveraging on some of these informations at every point in time. So this is the destination where I was coming to, but this is not the final place where I'm coming to. This is based on months. I am not looking at them on months. I'm picking it as a country, Nigeria. But if you want to segregate your inflation rates to relate it according to the location or the locality, then this data in this place might be very useful to you. For me, it is not that useful to me. I have to look for the one that has to do with all comprehensive data, general for everybody. Okay. Now, I have that one. I've already secured it before now. And that is contained in this link that I have here. I'll just copy this link and use the same opportunity to introduce a new program, the program that we'll be going into after this thing. Like I mentioned to us, we actually designed this project to be that will not end up talking about statistics and talking about cost estimating and the rest of them. No. The essence of this program is to make it to be as practical as possible. And so that at the end of the section or the program, you will have something concrete that you can always hold on to. The way we started with Excel, we did Revit, we did Primavera, and we'll be doing Plan Swift and the Navisworks. In this section, we are introducing something that is different, which is why we are asking for you to make sure that the Excel version that you're using is not less than 2016. And if for any reason the Excel version that you're using is 2006, less than 2016, we also provided an additional add-on application that you need to go and install, which is the Power Query. So without wasting time, I'll just pick this information, which is I copy the direct information, and I'll move over to my Excel to go and launch Power Query for the first time. We're not going to be doing Power Query now, but I want to use Power Query to demonstrate Power Query, to use it to present what we'll be doing. Hopefully, by tomorrow or thereabouts, we'll go into Power Query proper. Now, when you come here, Power Query is actually built at the back of Excel. From 2016, it is part of your Excel, but it's not always there on the front view. Is actually, you need to click some buttons before it can launch. Now, the interface actually looks like Excel interface, but it is a little bit different. And believe you me, it requires its own training, especially for you to be able to find it comfortable. So to launch Power Query, if you have 2016 and above, come down on your tabs here. You see the one that says data. All right. Click on data. When you click on data, on the far left side, you will see the section, that ribbon that says get and transform data. Now, the essence of this is because your data source will be coming from different sources. And a good number of those data sources are not the conventional Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. I mean the XLXS or the DOCX that you have. No, those are the type that we used to have before. So that is why we're looking at it like the sources of your data can actually be coming from so many things. Now, in Power Query has the ability to receive data from more than 180 something sources. 180 something sources. That is massive. All right. And it's something that we have not seen before. What I was trying to say is that Power Query has the ability to receive data from different sources. That is why we say you are going to get data, and it's not only going to get the data, it's actually going to transform the data. And by transforming the data, it means that sometimes the data that you're receiving are not pure. They are corrupted, either during data entry or during the processing. The data are not structured. They come in different versions. But with Power Query, you are able to process the data so that the data becomes clean and fit for your database and processing. But the whole essence of using Power Query is not only just for processing it, it's just to process your data so that you can be able to use it to carry out your analysis. For example, when you have a data that is a test data, mean something like maybe a name, grade 20 concrete, which you know it is test. You cannot be able to carry out some operations, like maybe calculation operations on it, because the data type are not the same. So but with Power Query, you can be able to transform the data, you can be able to extract the data, and you can be able to load the data into the final processing application that you want to use and do the processing. So that is how powerful Power Query is, which is why we deemed it necessary that we should also introduce this alongside in the course of this construction data management and analysis that we're talking about. So to begin it now, we have come down to data. And then the next place where we have to focus on is how to get data. And when you come to get data, you discover that you can actually get data from different sources. You can get data from test file or from CSV. You can get data from recent sources, which is project that you have done in the past. You can get it from existing connections that you have in your Excel. You can also get it from table/range. In the course of the Excel class that we did, I reminded us that we should pay attention. That most of the things that we'll be talking about will still be coming out in one way or the other. In that class, we talked about tables, how to create a table, how to create a range. Now, this place is also telling us that you can actually get data from your table or range. Now, but where we want to pay more attention, because what we copied is the link of that file, is to get data from a website. All right? If you want to see more options where you can get data, you can always click here. You see that you have different options where you can get data. So we're not going to go into them for today because we are just passing through this Power Query for now. So we'll come down to our from website, click from website. When you click it, it will launch a small window. Let's wait for the window to launch. All right. Can you see my window from web? If you can see that window from web, just indicate, let me know. Now you have windows from web. All I need is just from this place. Now I have to put the URL of that website where I want to extract my data directly from. I don't have to go and start copying the table. Maybe I'll miss the format, I miss the arrangement and stuff like that. No. With Excel Power Query, that is why it's so powerful. You just have to copy the link of that addition and come and paste it here and click OK. And watch Excel go to the web, go to that website and extract the table that is there. Now, if I had downloaded that Excel file that we copied the link from, and by the way, what I did on that place was this. Let me go back and show you exactly what I did so that when you want to extract the data from a website, it wouldn't be that difficult for you also. Now, what I did here was, I will close this application that is open. What I did here was, when this is the file that you want to extract, you want to copy this file, no matter the website where it is hosted, so long as it is a file that contains information that you need, all you need is just come down to where that file is hosted, right click on it. When you click right click, you should be able to see this one, copy link. Click that copy link, and then the application would have copied the link for you. And the rest, you come down to your Excel, and now click it and then do the rest of things that we did. It will bring you up to this point. All right. Now it is going through that website. Now it has extracted that document, that Excel dots. Look at it here, up here. This is the website. And if you go further, you see that it has extracted it now. Look at it there on the tooltip that is saying to me. Now I am looking at the contents of that application, of that document. So I can now go and click. Once I click each one, the application will go, the Power Query will go ahead to open each file. And I can be able to look at each sheet, the way it is arranged. Now it is seeing them that we have table 1, table 2, table 3, table 4, table 5. And then it's also seeing some other ones, which are print area, print this, print that. You don't get confused. For me, I already know the documents that we're talking about. And I know that the things I'm looking for are on table 1. So I don't have to go and start querying the other ones. It's often good practice for you to know the location of your data, because you might not be able to preview this data properly in this environment. Okay? But the one I'm looking for is on my table 1. All right? Now, when I come down to table 1, I can actually preview the data there and look at it and discover that, yes, this data that I have here is not properly structured. Like I talked about having dirty data. This is actually dirty data. I know one might actually argue that, but this thing was actually hosted on a particular website. Yes, they hosted it in a particular format and presentation format that they think will be appealing enough or explanatory enough. But when you're trying to bring it in to process, when you're trying to bring the data in to be able to analyze it, you can't work with that data the way it was formatted. Just like the way our bill of quantity is formatted here now. You cannot be able to work with this bill of quantity with this formatting that it has, because it will be giving you some null values, and as well as be giving you some things like I may be having what you call currency symbol, and you cannot be able to operate on currency symbol per se. So it's always good practice for you to, first of all, do what we call ETL. ETL stands for extract your data, which you have just done. We have been able to extract this data into Power Query. Then the next thing we are going to be doing is you transform your data, which is when you now have to try to clean up the data, remove all the things, the chaff, the unwanted things, process the data and make sure and structure it properly in a way that it will be able to receive your analysis and the rest of them. And then you do the final aspect of ETL, which is load your data. By loading, it means that you're now loading it back into an application where you want to use it, so that you can be able to carry out the last part of it. And for the purpose of introducing Power Query, I will use this Excel to introduce Power Query today. But subsequently, when we have to talk about Power Query, we'll be taking Power Query as it exists inside Power BI. Because Power Query is very, very important in Excel, to Microsoft. That is why they placed it not only on Excel, but also they place it inside Power BI. So that you don't have to come to process your data inside the Excel environment, export it out, and go and move it and start using it inside Power BI. No. Now, because they understand that constantly, Power BI is mostly for data analysis and visualization, but it cannot be able to process your data. It cannot be able to clean up your data. It cannot be able to transform your data alone. That's why they have to build up a backup end of it, which is the Power Query. Okay. I see that I have two questions and then one hand is up. Emmanuel Odunia, you raise your hand. If you have a question, please, can you post it on the question and answer? Aliyu Usman Kotu said, sir, please, the information from MPS and the stock exchange, which is more reliable? The stock exchange gives you basic information about the value of your stock. So it's always good that you put the right peg in the right hole. I cannot be looking for information on inflation and I start hunting for it from, let's say, CBN websites. I might be able to get an information from CBN website, but oftentimes the ones I'm getting from CBN website might not be or might not match up with what the MPS may have. I know that it's supposed to be the same, but whether you like it or not, they have their different sources and they have their different method of calculations, which most likely might be giving you different results. So it's always advisable when you need foreign exchange information, CBN is your go-to location for that. When you have CPI, inflation in figures and the rest of them, NBS is your location for that or website for that. And when you have something like maybe stock exchange, stock values and the rest of them, trading information and the rest of them, stock exchange should be the destination for that kind of information. Okay. All right. Now we move. So I have selected my table one. Now I can be able to preview it, but where I want to call our attention is on, there are only 3 tabs that are here. The first tab, like you know, is load, and you can also see load 2. All right. We'll explain more about these ones when we start our Power Query. It will always be see this load to load to load, and we'll use it as much as possible. Then what load means is simply self-explanatory. To load means that I just don't want to transfer anything in this data. The data is okay. The data is clean enough. I just want to start processing the data or analyzing with the data. That is what load means. Then to load to means I want to load it. I don't want to load it directly into my processing application. I just want to load it somewhere, either to load it to my connections. We'll explain that when we get to Power Query proper, or load it into a Power Query, Power Pivots table, or load it into my Excel table and the rest of them. All right. That is what load is basically about. But we're not loading anything now. Then on the other one, you have your transform data. If you're using the older version of Excel, you might be seeing something like edit data or stuff like that. So, but since all of us are on the same platform, which is 2016 and above, we will be seeing most likely transform data. When you come to transform data, this is where you want to begin the transformation exercise that you want to do. And part of those transformation I mentioned to us will include extracting data, which we have done, transforming data, removing them, and doing all manner of things. We'll do something like that now so that we can be able to actually preview what it feels like. And then, of course, the last one is very self-explanatory, which is cancel. When you want to cancel the whole operation that you have started, you just click the cancel and it will cancel. So for me now in this exercise, I will click transform and then wait for Power Query now to launch. And this is the interface of Power Query. Okay. The interface of Power Query is divided into, let me say 5 or 6. One of the most important windows that you will be talking about is where you have your tabs. Okay. This is where you will get all the tools that you'll be using for all that you are doing. Then when we finish, we'll be using this 2 tab here, which is close and load. It is more like what we do, the only door or window that we can use to enter and exit Power Query. Okay. And then we have also on this side, we have our queries panel on this side. Most importantly, we have our queries settings on this side. And then we now have our windows or layouts on this side. And finally, we have what is called the formula bar or the formula bar here. Okay. Remember I said some of the tools that you'll be using, you'll find them most likely on the ribbons above. And on the far left side, we have our queries. On the far right side, we have our query settings. On the center, we have our layout or the tables. And of course, we have finally the formula bar. All right, let me clean up what we have here. Look now, as the moment I launched Power Query has received that file. Remember, the name of my file was table 1. That is what it's still giving me here. And one of the things that good practices that we're supposed to do is for us to, first of all, rename it. And when we are renaming it now, we're not working with that data. Remember, we did not download this file. We are connecting directly to that file that is on NPS website. But by working with Power Query is not working on your original file. Rather, Power Query will be making a copy of that original file so that you don't end up destroying your original file or the source of your file. So one of the good practices that we can actually do is to come down first of all here to name our query. At the moment, the name of our query is table 1. So we can call it FX_2023. All right, CPI_2023. What it means is that this is the cost Consumer Price Index for 2023. It is not meaning that it is only 2023 information that is here. No, it is the date that we have downloaded this information. All right. Another thing that is also very important while we are here renaming this thing, as soon as we renamed it and click enter, on this other right side also, the query that we have under the queries panel has turned to, please, this is an old query that I was working on. Let me clean it at this moment. The query that we have here has become that CPI 2023. Telling you that you can actually have more tables, thousands or hundreds of tables here without any problem. And one beautiful part about Power Query is that Power Query can be able to work on thousands and millions of rows of data without even having any problem, any lag issue. Whereas you load a data that is up to 10 million rows in Excel and the whole thing freezes up. But with Power Query, you can load data that is as much as 50 million rows and it will not even affect the processing of the application, so long as your computer power is able to carry on with the processing. So we have that one secured already. This is the query that we are working on. By the time we get to Power Query proper, we might see how you can have different queries here. In fact, we will actually demonstrate something like that today. Now, another important aspect is this one that you have applied steps. Now, in applied steps, because the whole essence of Power Query is to bring in automation, so that there are some certain things that you do manually. You don't have to be repeating them every time. So long as you have been able to do it once, the rest is that next time you want to repeat such task, the application, the computer will just run it automatically for you. That is why Power Query is actually very powerful. Because Power Query is not just doing this processing and cleaning your data. It simply means that Power Query has the ability to clean any future data that you have. Like if the way we are going to process this, and after processing it, and we'll keep this Power Query and we'll save it. Next time again, we come back here again and we use the same link to download this same information. By the time August 2023 data is available, Power Query will simply process it as if it was the same thing that we are doing that we did last time. That is the beauty and power of this Power Query. So on this place, we have the apply step. This is where it is giving you any step that you have taken. This is where the application is noting them down, so that when next you load another project, it will automatically apply those steps. And the first step that it applied is source. When I click this source, I discover that it is now linking me back to where I got that information from. Look at it here. It says Excel workbook, open bracket, web.contents, open bracket. Now, this is the address where we got that information from. In as much as this website, this address does not change, even by next month, all we need to just do is come here and change this July to August, and the application will go and search for the August one and download it and process and apply all these steps that we're going to be introducing today on the application. All right. So these are the various steps that it has applied so far. The first step that it applies is by default. Whenever you load any data into Power Query, it will apply this first one automatically, which is source. Then the next one is navigation. It is telling you how it has gone to bring in the source. into your application. You may not see navigation in any other data that you work on that you load from your computer. But when you're loading any information from the web or thereabout, you will always see navigation. All right. Then we have promote headers. Before I start talking about promote headers, remember, the essence of bringing a data into Power Query is because you want to transform the data. And by transform the data, I mean that you want to clean up the data and remove some chaff, a lot of things that are not structured in the data. As it stands now, when you look closely on this tiny line that you have on top here, you discover that there are different grays, colors. I have the green one, I have the gray one, and I have it not randomly. Now, this is Power Query trying to analyze every row on this your data. All right. And to have an understanding, an idea of how many rows that we are talking about, you look down on this lower side, you see that 24 columns and 373 rows of data. So if I have to roll down, I have to roll down 373 rows before I can get to the end of this document. That's what it's telling me. And then Power Query has analyzed every content on this row, and it's telling me that if you bring your cursor over it now, there will be a tooltip that will come up. It's saying that this table analysis is saying that the table is about 9% valid. It simply means there is a lot of cleaning that we need to clean up here to clean up this data so that it will become 100% or something closer to that for us to be able to use them. Like I mentioned, the data is not yet clean. We need to clean it. And it's also telling you that you have about 341%, 341 or equivalent of 991% empty rows. All right. And then when you go through each and every one of them, you will see the analysis that it will be pointing out for you. We're not talking about them now because the whole essence of coming here is for us to be able to process this data, take them to where we're going to be using them for this tonight. So to begin, on this other upper side, I have some of the tools that we'll be using. We have 3 homes. And let me also use the opportunity to call your attention to it so that it doesn't throw you off balance. When you open Power Query from Excel, you will be having about 4 tabs: the Home tab, the Transform tab, the Add Column tab, and the View tab. But when you open Power Query under Power BI, in Power BI, you'll be having more than 4 tabs. You'll be having about 5 or 6 tabs. All right. And again, some of the arrangement of things that you have around here might not be exactly the same place where it is in Power BI. So always have that in mind. So when we come down here, this is our Home tab. As soon as we come down here, Home tab is where you carry out most of your transformation activities using any of these tools that you found here. A good number of the things, analysis that you do in Excel, you will do it here, even without making so much effort. Okay. So one of the things that we can do here is we can do also under your Transform tab, you can do a lot of things that you can, some of the tools that you have here under your transformation. See, these tools here are also available under your Transform tab. But what you have under your Transform tab are some of the transformations that you can carry out on multiple selected columns, multiple selected rows or columns. Whereas under the Add columns, the transformation that you can carry out here are transformation that you can carry out on only on individual rows at a time. So you might see that you have the same information that you have on Transform, you have them also on Add columns. It simply means that it's only when you are under the Add columns and you want to use any of those tools, it will only be applied to a new column that you have selected. So always be mindful of that. Whereas under your Transform, you can apply it to any column that you want. So we go ahead now. One of the things that we need to we'll come down to, we look closely and we discover that, yes, this column has January, February, down, down, down. And when it gets to December, it turns to 2096, and then it starts from January again. What it simply means is that this is January 1995, February 1995, March 1995, and so on and so forth. It will continue until it gets to the latest information that you have, the end. Okay? So to begin my transformations, one of the things that I want to do is I want to look through the data and be able to find the heading of this data. And I discovered that the heading of this data is on my row 3, which I have monthly average, month on change, year on change, and rest of them. So one of the first things I want to do is I'll come down to my Home tab. Okay. I'll come down to under my Home tab. I have reduce row directly on top of my head. I say, okay, come under my reduce row, I come down to reduce row, remove top rows. I click that remove top rows. Now it's asking me, oh, sorry, forgive me. This is where we were the last time. But I don't want to use this change type. What I did is this. When you come into Power Query does not have undo button. It does not have Control Z. The only thing that you can use to control things in Power Query is by using the applied steps. It's by using the applied steps. When you have a step that you don't like, let's say I do remove column. I remove this column that I have. I selected a column and I remove the column. The moment I remove that column, Power Query will apply that step that I've just taken now. It recognizes that I've just removed a column. And to see what it was like before, this is column number 3. When I click the row, the apply step before it, you discover that column number 2 was there before. But under column number 3, the instruction or the application or the processing was that I remove column number 2. So Power Query is noting all those steps that you're taking and it's aggregating all of them under this your applied steps. At every point in time you think that you have made a mistake like we have just made now, we're not supposed to remove column number 2. I'll just come here and click cancel and it will restore back that column that it has just taken away. So one of the things that I said I want to do is I want to remove top rows. All right. Click remove top rows and I click remove top rows. The application will launch for me and ask me how many rows do I want to remove. I want to remove from the beginning, which is 1, 2, and leave only 3. So I want to remove 2 rows on top of my column, and it will go ahead and remove the 2 rows. And the moment it has removed 2 rows for me, I can now go ahead and promote this other one because it will be the title of my columns. I'll go ahead and promote them and say, come down here also under my transformation. Use first row as header. I'll click it. It will promote this first row now. Now you now see that my header has become monthly, 12-month average, and the rest of them. Okay? My data is taking shape now. Now, another thing that I also have to do is when I come down to this place, this row number 1 here that I have upper column that I have here, wait, is not really useful for me. Okay? If you look now, most of the columns has it as null. Null simply means empty. And then the other this place now, it has about 507 thereabouts. It's not really important to me. So I will just go through to be sure that the column does not contain valid data that I want to remove. When I've previewed it completely, I discover that almost all my data is beginning from row number 2. Okay, so I can go ahead now and remove this other row too. All right, I'll go and say remove top row. And the top row that I want to remove is row number 1. And I click OK. Then the application has gone ahead to remove that row number 1. Okay, now all the information that are useful to me are the ones that I'm keeping. And on this side is all just keeping line up of all of those informations. All those are applied steps. Then the next thing I have to do also is look at this thing like I explained to us. This is January 1995 down to December 1995. I will come down to this column that I have selected now. And the next thing I have to go and do for it is that I come down and say, there are in Power Query, there are actually more than 3 ways that you can actually achieve anything. In Power Query now, what I want to do is I want to fill down all this information so that from here to this place where you have the next figure, 1996, 1995 will fill it up. And likewise, this other one will fill up to 1997. Can come down to my transformation and come down to under my any column. Particularly is looking at the one that I have selected. Under my field, you will see fill down. I'll now click fill down. Now it has filled 1995 up to where you have 1996 beginning. Then 1996 will fill from there up to where you have 1997 beginning. And then when I look at the analysis of my column, I discovered that I actually have 100% valid column now. That gray mark that was showing me empty columns and the rest of them is no more there. So I have this one now sorted out now. Then it's also good practice to rename this column. This one will become my year. Then the next one is, I ask myself, what are the informations that are useful to me? Because all of these informations may not be useful for my analysis. Only the ones that are useful for the analysis are the ones that I will be focusing more on. On this side, on this monthly, up to where you have year on year, where you have this one. This is talking about CPI, inflation, including food. This including agricultural products. Then the other section is talking about inflation, less agricultural products. Now, construction, is not being influenced. The inflation that affects construction is not being influenced by agricultural products. So we are using the one that is less agricultural products, because oftentimes agricultural products can actually have more impact on inflation. Like if you look at the analysis that they published on newspaper of, is it today or yesterday, you will see that after you have the basic ones that are driving it up, you have food, clothing, and the rest of them that were pushing up the inflation also. So I don't usually focus more on those ones. So I'll just select all the columns, which I'm not going to be using, and quickly go to my home tab and use my remove columns. I've removed those ones. The next thing I have to do is I have to come down here also. Now, look at the information that I have here now. It is giving me that data the way I want it. But this data that I have is not yet clean the way I also expect to have them, because I have January, February, March, these. I don't have to use them like this. I have to find a way to compress the data, like say, okay, every 2015, this is the one I should have. 2017, this is the one I should have. Okay. So I can actually pick any year, any month that I want. But for the purpose of saving time, because we're not talking about Power Query, we want to actually have to do other things, I will just go ahead and pick this information. But before I pick it, I just have to go and remove, because this one still has some empty cells that are in it. If you click this filter, you discover that it has a null value. All right. Every null value is not important. So you can just go ahead and uncheck it. When you click on check, the same way you do your filter in Excel, click on check and click OK. You discover that this thing now will not be clean. So our data is not clean and fit for us to start using them as for our analysis. Now, remember what I said. That is where you have to use this close and load. When I click close and load, I have two options. One, close and load. When I say close and load, it will load it into an Excel environment. The alternative is to close and load to. When I say close and load to, it will now ask me, where do you want to load it? Do you want to load it into a table, into a Power Query table report, into a Power Pivot chart, or create only connection? All right? Or you want to create connection and add it to a data model. I say, yes, I want to add it to a data model, and then I want to create connection. All right. When I click OK, it will simply exit from here. Let me just click that OK, and then we'll exit from here. Then Power Query will now go and create that query for me on the right side. Now it has loaded there 343 rows, but I don't see it anywhere, but it has connected that data now down to my computer. It is now living inside this application. At every point in time, I can now go and start saying, okay, my cost projection. Let me open this one and let's use this. I can start and say, okay, I have this application here. I want to load that file inside this place now. I can now go and say, okay, right click, load to. And I'll ask it to load it into this table. And I'll give it a location, which is here. And I'll say, okay. It will take some seconds, but the application will just go ahead and load that in. I think we made a mistake, but okay, that's not a problem. It is trying to generate the relationship, and it will end up loading it inside this place. Just give it some seconds. It will load the whole of that table that we have processed here now in Power Query, in Excel, so that we can start using them. Okay. Yeah, we have it. One mistake that we made is this. We did not properly name our table, but not to worry about that. At every point in time, you can always get back to the same Power Query and continue with your edit by coming down here and doing right click, and you'll see edit. When you do edit, you can always go and rename whatever things or correct whatever relationship or clean whatever thing that you want to clean in your application. This is supposed to be year, and this is supposed to be month, and this is supposed to be rates. or CPI. When I'm done, I'll just say click and load to. Now, automatically, all of these that I have here will update themselves. I don't have to do anything special. Now they have updated themselves, and I can start working with the information. All right. This is how you can be able to use it and extract information from a different location, or maybe information that you have even on your Excel. But for the purpose of this exercise that we're doing, I already have this information that I have created for us. Remember, in the question that we are given, we're told that we want to bid for a job. We want to give preliminary cost estimate of a job in 2023. And the reasons why we are doing that is because we have constraint of time. We don't have available information as at the moment and stuff like that. And then we have experience or cost data. In our cost data, a similar project like that was done in 2015. Now, what we are asking is this: how do we get the cost indices that we can use? We don't have any other cost indices, but what we have is inflation index over time since 2015 till date. And we have been able to go to the cost data and extract that information. All right. Now, the next thing we are going to be doing is how to process that information, which we have here in our Excel. Now, to process that information, now, this is the same information that we have before, but on this one is the difference is that this one is just that we have extracted this one and converted it only to year, whereas the one that we did below here is year and month. Okay, it doesn't really matter. Now, the cost indices that we have cost information for our project with a base time of 2015. Then we are expected to upgrade that cost information based on inflation information as at 2023. All right. How can we do this thing? One of the things that we can actually do is this. When we know that in 2015, in 2015, the cost of that same project was about, let's say, 65 million naira. This is just for our essence of our discussion. It's not really obtainable, but for the purpose of our discussion, let's say it's 65 million naira. And at the moment, this thing is just this queries here on the side is obstructing my view. I can easily close it at every point in time. When I want to open it, I come down to data. On this panel, you will see queries and connection. Click it, it will come up again. All right. All right. So assuming that this is 65,000 naira, that is the cost of the project as at 2015. What will be the cost as at 2023? The best way that you can actually estimate that is by going down again in time past, go down to the cost history. Our base year that we are talking about is 2015. Let's say 2015 here. Okay. And I went ahead to use a formula that is called lookup. And my lookup formula says equal to lookup. What lookup does is that it will look up a value from a particular table or vector and return the answer that you want. I look up this value 2015. I put comma. From this table, this is the table. Okay. I'll go down to the end of it. I put comma. Then it's asking me to select my answer table. My answer, I want my answer not to be the inflation. I want the answer to be the CPI. But one important thing that you need to note is that the range of your table also needs to be the range of your answer or result table. They need to be the same. Otherwise, this lookup formula will not be working very well. And then you put your closing parentheses and close. Now it has gone to look at it now. It says that it is 170.52. When I come down to 2015 exactly, and I look at 2015, the CPI Consumer Price Index as at that time is 170.52. That means that my formula is actually very correct. All right. Then I come down again because I don't have to repeat it. Once it's a formula that I've just done, I can come here and fix this one so that it doesn't have to move away from this range that I've established. By fixing it, you mean that you have to use the dollar sign, put your dollar sign in front of your row so that it will not shift away from that row. Put your dollar sign in front of the row so that it will not move from the row. We don't have any issue with it moving away from the column because it will not move. We're not dragging horizontally. We are only dragging vertically. Okay? So the next thing, now, once we have fixed our row, it will not move away from that row. And by row, I mean the level, the ranking, this level that we have established down to the other level that we have established. The dragging will not make it to move away from there. So I can now go ahead and drag. So 2023, CPI is about 2023 is about 445.79. Okay. So now we have established our base year CPI and we have our current year CPI. Now, remember the cost index ratio is a function of your base year, your current year divided by your base year. If maybe you did a job in 2015 and that job cost you 500 naira and exchange rate as at that time is 1 naira, and you want to do another job again in this year and that job is going to cost you X and the exchange rate as at today is 10 naira. It simply means that for you to get it based on exchange rate, the cost index of exchange rate, you simply have to do the current now, which is 10 naira, divided by the previous as at the time when you're doing the job, which is 1 naira. Two of them will give you 10 naira. It simply means that the cost difference as at 10 years ago when you did it, or 5 years ago when you did that job, was about 5 naira. Now today it has multiplied by about 1,000%, which is 10 times. That is what this cost index ratio is, not percentage. It is ratio. 1:5. That is what this one is all about. So what we'll be doing here is this. When we'll come down here, we'll now say, okay, our cost index ratio formula, which I've established here, is the current CPI divided by the base CPI. And by that, I mean, the current CPI is this, divided by the base CPI, which is this. And it gives me that it is 2.61. Wow, it might look very huge. It simply means that for a job that was done in 2015 at the cost of 65,000 naira, when you want to do it based on only the CPI alone, if you want to track only the inflation that have taken place between 2015 and 2023, it simply means that this cost that you have here, you'll be multiplying it by 2.6 times. So it tells me that this thing that costs 65,000 naira in 2015, as at today's cost, will be costing as much as 169,650 naira. So this is how you can be able to use it on the fly to get. But the reality is that the cost difference that happens over time is not just about this based on cost index. There are so many other things that come into play. Like you might be working on a job also within the same period that you have inflation that has taken over. So you also have dollar rates either depreciating or appreciating over the same period of time. Those are two different factors that can play against, either for or against what you're talking about. And that will lead us to the next thing, which we're talking about here. How to adjust your cost index ratio for time. You are doing a job today. We don't know what the trend would be tomorrow. Like I remember somebody asked a question when we were talking about in our overhead yesterday. Somebody asked a question under this place. How do you make these projections, some of these projections? How do you know how much it will cost? Variations on risk and construction and the rest of them. Now, these things are things that you know over time, especially when you have to be price variations. Price variation, you go and look at the trend of time, how things have changed over time, and you try to analyze it. That yesterday, the last time we did Excel class, the resource person was trying to let us understand of this tool. When you come down in your Excel under data, you come down to forecast. There is this tool that is called forecast sheet. The resource person was trying to tell us how you can be able to be making some projections into what the possible future trend would be. But here now, we're not using that application to run this calculation now. We are actually going to be running it more using statistical available informations now. All right. To do that is we're trying to project into the future what the possible cost of this inflation would be over time. And the formula for that is projected cost index for anything that you want to calculate, remember what we did. We're able to establish this ratio, and then we use ratio to update our costs. What cost us 65,000 naira in 2015 is now costing about 169 naira 169,065 naira. Now, when we want to project it over time, maybe the job will not be completed in 2023. The job will not be completed in 2025. What should be the amount that we add to cover for price variation, price fluctuations, uncertainties that are in the construction market, given the trend that we have witnessed within 2015 and 2023? Follow my line of thought. So to be able to do that now, we have to fall back on how to adjust our cost index ratio for time. Now, to adjust it, the formula that you need to use to do that is your cost index ratio, which is this figure that we have gotten here now, because this one has given you the inflation rate, the rate of change between the current year and the base year, which is this figure. Now, what you now be doing is that the rate of change between the current year and the base year times 100% plus inflation rate raised to the number of years that you're projecting into the future. Now, this might just be a statistics, but it has been proven. This might just be a formula, but it has been proven over time. And if you can still remember very well when you were doing some of your statistics class, these formulas, we actually brushed through them. But if you're one of those people who was actually praying not to rewrite your statistics class, sorry to burst your bubble, we are back to it again. So how do we project it? The formula says that the projection of cost index projection that we have to use is we'll use the cost index ratio, multiply it by 100% plus inflation rates, raise two of them together by the number of years. But there is something that you need to establish. Inflation rate is not something that they presented this column here. This is a calculated inflation rate. And you know very well that inflation is the trend time. By that, I mean that when you bring in change between the current minus the base divided by the base, that will give you the inflation rates that have taken over. And when you multiply it by 100, it will not be giving it to you in percentage. Okay? That's the basic standard formula for calculating inflation. What I mean by that is this. When you still want to use this information to calculate your inflation, what you'll now be doing is your current CPI minus your base CPI divided by the base CPI. That will give you inflation rates. But the inflation rate that is giving you is not inflation rate over time. It's not giving you inflation rate that has aggregated over the period. What is giving you is only the inflation that has accumulated between this 2015 and 2023. By way of adding more emphasis, let us now say, okay, 2023 minus 2015. How many years are we even talking about? It's telling you that it will give you inflation rate that have taken place over 8 years period. But come think about it. The data that we are getting from NBS, they are not giving us a data that is exiting from 2015, 1995. They're not giving us data that is exiting from the end part of 1995 into 1996. They're actually giving us data that is existing inside 1995, moving over to 1990, going forward. And by that, I mean, when you look at this thing that we did here, we said 2023 minus 2015. It does not recognize that some of this data was established and useful for the year 2015. It is only calculating the data that will start spanning from after 2015 back to 2023. And by that, to correct it is you simply do plus 1. So if you have to count 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, you discover that you actually have 9 years in between and not 8 years as against our calculation. So it's always very important for you to add this the extra one. Now we go over. So to calculate our inflation rate, like I said, the formula says the inflation rate is the same thing as our current index, open bracket is very important. Our current index, which is this one, minus our base index, which is this one, close your bracket, and then divide by your base index. Click OK. It says that the inflation rate over that period of 9 years is about 1.6. Remember, this is not percentage. To convert it back to percent, you need to multiply by 100. So if you're looking at it as percentage, you're looking at 161%, 61.4%. But if you're talking about the actual percentage change, you will be looking at about this minus 100. You'll be looking at about 61.43% change. If you're looking at it as percentage, the total percentage in this period is about 161.4%. But if you're talking about percentage change over the time, you're talking about 61.43% change over the time. Always have that in mind. So we have established our cost index, our inflation rate. But now we have to discount our inflation into annual inflation rates. That way you can be able to actually understand what is the inflation that happens in every year on the average. That is what the next step we need to do. We have established that this is our inflation, but we need to discount it over the period of years and divide it. I know maybe a lazy approach would just be to just divide this in by the number of years that you have. Something like this, divided by 8. But keep this figure in mind. Let's leave this figure here and use it to track what we are going to get, whether it will work out well or not. Oh, sorry, my division is not really 8, it's 9. Okay, let's leave it like this and watch. Now, the formula for you to actually do your average annual inflation rate is, which is more like your cost index ratio raised to power the inverse of the year minus 1. Okay, and by that, what I mean by that is, remember we have already established this other part of this formula. We have established this part of this formula before now. We established them here as our cost index ratio. It's the same thing. All right. Then this other part is the part that we have to introduce new here now to be able to get it. We are dividing 1 by the total number of years that we have, and then we minus 1 at the end of it. So to run that calculation, we say, okay, open your okay, we don't have to open because we have already calculated this thing before now. So I'll just go ahead and pick the value. Cost index ratio is this one. I've selected the value. Now the next thing I have to do is to raise to power. I'll now raise it to power, open bracket and close. 1 divided by how many number of years difference are we talking about? We're talking about 9 years difference gap between two of them. Okay, we'll put 9 and then we'll divide it by 2. And when you have done that, it's always good for you to guide Excel in how it should operate the formulas. Minus 1. Now our formula is complete. Now we can now say enter. Now look at what we are having here as against what we have earlier here before. 2 of them are not the same. It actually says that on the average over time, our inflation has been growing at 0.11. And when you want to convert it to percentage, you'll be looking at 11%, 11.269% on the average. Every year, it will increase by 11.269%. Now, once you have established this, now the next thing is not for you to plug in the figures into this formula for your projection. All right. Now, the figures that we need is this. We have our cost index ratio already. Now we have 1 plus, we have our inflation rate, which is our annual inflation rate now. And then we have our number of years that we want to project. Okay. Now, look at what we're going to be doing next now. Because our intention is to project it for the next, how many years? Project is between this one, 2023 to 2000, this, which will give us like how many years? Let's just calculate it here. This minus this plus 1. To the next 3 years. That is our projection. We are projecting it to the next 3 years. Now, to run that projection, now we'll come down here and say is equal to. Okay. Remember the formula and follow alongside with me. CPI, these are CPI, times open bracket and close. We have 1 plus our inflation rate. Our inflation rate is about 0.11. 0.11. Then all together, we raise them up to the power number of years that we're talking about. In this case, it is 3 years. And we say enter. As soon as we make it enter now, it simply means that it's about 3.6 or the equivalent of 360%. It simply means that whatever it is that is costing us 169,650 naira today in 2023 will be going up based on the trend of inflation in the past. It will be going up by about 3.6. And then if for us to project that one, I will not say it will be equal to, it will now be equal to the base cost that we have, that we use in starting this project is this times 3.6. That means that by the time if you follow alongside with the trend of inflation that has happened over time, this thing will be costing you as much as this amount, all right? It will be costing you as much as this amount over the period of this. Alternatively, if I want to base my calculation or my projection for 2025 based on the base cost of 2015, then I have to go and establish the number of my years of projection now. I have to go and establish it. Number of years of projection will now be 2025 minus 2015 plus 1 will be 11 years. I now have to go and start working it like this. I'll change this my 3 years now to 11 years. That means the cost will now be 65,000 times this amount that I have here. Either way, it may not always be the same. Now, the different reason why it's not the same is because between this 2015 up to this period, the inflation trend was not as much as it was within the last period of time that you have. And when you go and look at the actual table that we have here, let's see it now. Between 2015, it was about 170. Then within a space of 8-9 years, it tripled down to how many? 440 something. All right. So any projection that you're doing now will be taking the rate of change that has happened within this period to project that in. That is how this calculation now actually accumulates and happens over time. Do we have any question? Or are we following? If I'm too fast, please just call my attention. I will slow down. But I want us to achieve as much things as possible. QS Femi, you raise your hand.
There's a question on the chat book from Ayodele Oyelami saying, please, can we use the price of a bag of cement or reinforcements as examples for better understanding and
Okay, thank you, QS Ayodele. What we actually did now is not too different from bag of cement. Assuming that you can just want to change this one, bag of cement in 2025, in 2015, let's say it was about 201.50. And maybe in 2023, you're working on a project. You want to work on a project. Well, you know very well that the price of cement as at 2025 is 2,150 naira. And you know the current price of cement, or you don't know the current price of cement as of now. But you want to base your actual calculations based on the inflation rate that has taken place over time. Because if there is no inflation in an economy, there is actually no need for you to increase your prices. Everything remains steady. Like economists will say, ceteris paribus. So if you want to know, if you know the inflation that has taken place over the period of time that you want to project your new cost, you can always come down here and say, okay, the inflation rate over time, in 2015, it was about 117 naira, 52 kobo. And in 2023, it's about 445 naira, 79 kobo. The difference, like I've told you how to calculate it, index, cost index, which is the ratio, is the differences in the original cost divided by the base cost, all right? And by that, you already have the CPI of your current CPI and the base one, which are here and here, which are also available from the table, which were extracted from the website of NPS or any other of what your organization that you want to leverage on their cost index. So we're not trying to project the actual market cost price of cement. No. What we are doing is to take care of the possible effects of inflation over that period of time. Like I said, this is an estimation that you're doing, your rough estimation that you're doing. You might get it very correctly. It might not be close exactly, but definitely because you're working with data, you will not be far from the truth. All right. So, okay. Now, over the period of time, it simply says that now our cost index ratio is about 2.61. It simply means that if you're working on a project in 2015 and you are being paid, or rather, let me use it this other way around. You bidded a project in 2015 and then started the project. And then the basic prices that you established in 2015 is about 2,150 naira for your cement. Now you want to call for variation of prices, or you want to claim for variation of prices on materials. It is accepted. The client has agreed. Now, for you to calculate it now, you will leverage on this information of cost index to be able to establish that. And one reliable source that you can always quote every point in time is the NPS, which I've just told you about. the National Bureau of Statistics. That is where we have extracted this information from. And then for us to calculate the index, the rate of change over that period of time, we say the cost index that is the current, the latest, which is 2023, which is 445 naira, 79 kobo, divided by the base, which is 170 naira by 52 kobo. That will now give us equal to this index that we have here times our cost. So it simply means that for you that bidded their job when cement was 250 naira, 2,150 naira as at that time, what you should be claiming for your cement by virtue of inflation that have taken place over that period of time between 2015 to 2023, you'll be claiming 2,620 naira. Nothing less. Also, we try to extrapolate and say, okay, you bidded a job in 2015. You executed it in 2023, concluded it in 2023. And the prevailing market price of cement as at that time is about 5,620 naira. Now you want to project for a similar job that you're going to do again, for the same client maybe, or for the same environment maybe, whereby you don't have much variations considered, will be completed or will be concluded in 2025. What should be the amount that you should be targeting? What should be the amount that you'll be targeting so that you don't end up injuring yourself like the previous experience? And then we said that the only best way they can actually approach that is by establishing, projecting your rate of inflation over time. And I told us that the rate of inflation is simply the current cost index minus the base cost index divided by the base cost index. That is inflation rate. Current CPI minus base divided by base. That will give you the rate, which is about 1.61 in this case now. But that is not the projection. When you are talking about projecting into the future, you're talking about more like compounding interest rates, inflation rates over time to see what the effect will now be. If it is 50% or 0.1% or 11% of inflation every year, for the number of years that you're going to be projecting into the future, you aggregate all of them together, and that is what you call your projection. So the formula for projecting your cost, your inflation rate, is your cost index ratio, which is this one. This one tells you about the change that has happened over that period of time. Now, in this period of time, it's telling us about this change, 2.61%, times our inflation rate. Open bracket 1 plus our inflation rate raised to power n, which is number. Now, inflation rate does not exist as a single digit. It's actually oftentimes you have to extract it from available data. And one source of that available data is your CPI, because your inflation over time is simply a function of your current CPI minus your base CPI divided by your base CPI. And when you multiply it by 100, it gives you percentage, which is the inflation rate, or what we call the rate of change. The percentage rate of change. All right? That's what I tried to explain there. And if you understood it to this very point, the rest I think should be more easier for you. We have established our inflation rates here at this point. And the next thing is for us to now discount that inflation rate to a total average annual inflation rate over time. That is to say that every year, out of this 1.61%, this 1.61 points that we have as inflation rate, how much exactly is it that happens in every single year that has come and gone? That is what we did in this other place now. And the formula for that is that CPI for current minus divided by the base raised to power 1 over number of years and then minus 1 from the equation. When you do that, it will give you that you are having an inflation rate of average inflation rate of about 0.11 or the equivalent of 11.269%. All right. Once you have gotten your inflation rate, remember your formula is requiring 3 inputs. One is your CPI or rate of change. Then the second one is your inflation rate, which you have already got an annual inflation rate already. And then the last one is the number of years. So once you have that, you now plug it into the formula and it will give you that you need about 8.46 points. That is simply that things are going to be changing by 8.46 times from the base. Okay? That is what that means. So I have a second question here. It says from Femi Akintan. He said, can you please confirm if the Consumer Price Index is applicable for construction? Because the primary data is mostly for food and agriculture. However, all the calculations make sense and are similar to the BCIS model. Please clarify if we can rely on CPI to be applicable for construction. Yes, I can clarify that you can rely on CPI for that. The CPI I'm talking about now, like I mentioned to, I don't want to go into, I actually have that data somewhere here. Maybe this is the right time to open it up if I can find it now. Let me see if I will see it. I have that data somewhere here. Hopefully it will open and launch. Let us see it. Now, what I'm saying is that the CPI has a composition, the one that is, like I mentioned to us. Remember when I was in Power Query, I told us that even though I understand the data I'm working on, there are various tables that are here. And remember, the information that I worked on is actually contained on table 1. And this is that same table 1. And remember, I told you that the people that hosted that information up there, hosted it, they have formatted it in a way that they think the user will most likely find it on find more understanding and make more sense of it. But in reality, when you want to process data, it is not clean. And this is what I mean by it's not clean. The formatting here is not well understood in Power Query. All right. So the person that asked that question on QS, Femi Abiwat, when you see here, it says all item index. That is what you have on this column. And then the other one, the second column, is it says all item index less farm produce. And then on the other last part now, it says food. So consumer price index does not only relate to food alone. Like I said, I have to be very selective on the one that I'm working with, the indices I'm working with. I am working with all this one that says all item index less farm produce. Okay, this is the one I usually work with because it does not include agricultural produce and the rest of them, which sometimes shoots up your inflation. They contribute reasonably to the cost of your inflation, so and stuff like that. So that is why I have to open this one to show you to you how the way that it actually appears. And for some other persons too, if you're working with the all item index now, it simply means that you'll be considering inflations that are coming from food and farm produce when you are using the all item index. That way, it may not be the true reality of what you're talking about because construction activities and construction costs is not being influenced by farm produce or food. So I usually work with the one that says all item index less farm produce. All right. Okay. I have another question here. I have another question here, and that question is coming from yes, Femi, I hope you got that answer. I have another question here from Justice Okechukwu. He says, would it be fine to utilize add all the individual annual inflation rates between 2 corresponding years and divide by the total number of years to get an average and tag it as the inflation rate? Actually, sir, I will try to demonstrate something like that. While I was running this calculation, remember, I signposted something. I said, keep eye on this thing. When we got to our average inflation, I said, keep eye on this inflation. And I divided it by the number of years that we have, which gave me about 0.179 or rather 0.18. And by the time we actually achieve our inflation rate, annual inflation rate, it is giving us as 0.11. Now, you see, when you're using this as the basis for your calculation, your final cost will be very high as against this very one. So depending on the authorities that you're working with or the organization that you're procuring against, if they permit it and allow it to fly, that is their loss. But when you're working on a competitive basis, it is often right for you to use the right information, use the right formula so that you can get the right results. Working with this shortcut of getting it here and then divided by the number of years to discount it over to average might not always be the right thing to do. Okay. And I think we have, that should be about it, the last of it all. So
we were talking about the CPI, and then somebody asked about cement and reinforcement, that we should apply that. And then you started answering questions.
Actually, I did the application somewhere here. I did an application somewhere here, and I tried to give an illustration. I said, you bidded for a job and you won the contract in 2015. In 2015, when you won that contract, part of the conditions of your contract is you supplied your basic prices of materials. And for cement in that year, the cost of cement was 2,150 naira. Now, you have been doing that contract up to 2023, and you want to claim for your variations that are taking place over time due to inflation. What should be the right amount that you should claim? There is no how you can sit in the comfort of your office and establish a factor that you can call inflation rate and apply it on this amount to be able to extrapolate that, say that this is the amount should be taken. No. The right approach to go about it is to always leverage the information that are available from the authorities that have been mandated to produce such information. And one of such that we talked about this evening is the MPS. When you get to the MPS, you should be able to see Consumer Price Index. And I tried to show us what is the kind of information that you may have there. There are some that might not be relevant to what you're talking about. You don't have to go there, crawling over it. Just pick the right one that you need. And for me, the one that we have extracted is Consumer Price Index, all items less farm produce, because that's the one that relates more to construction than every other one. When you extract it, and then you come down to your analysis now and discover that in your calculation, the base year 2015 is established as 170.52 points. And the current year equation that you're talking about is about in 2023 is about 445.79 points. For you to get the cost index ratio, the rate of change over this period of time, you simply divide the current year cost or rates index divided by the base year index, and it will give you a factor which is about 2.6. Now that 2.6 simply means that whatever it is that was costing you 1 naira as at 2015 will now cost you 1 naira times 2.61, which will give you the equivalent of 2.61 naira. Okay. Now, to put more stew to it, I said, okay, you have established what you should be claiming as your inflation. You will no more be asking for cost of cement as 2,150 naira. You will not be asking for cost of cement as 5,620 naira 74 kobo. And the reason for this is because of the trend of inflation which has taken place over the years. We have that settled. There are also times when you want to project into the future. That project you were doing was actually abandoned in 2023. And they want to begin the project again in 2025. What should be the price that you should be using, adopting as your price for cement? Because for now, they need you to send in information so that they can be able to arrange for fund. Or if you work with all these Ministry of Works and the rest of them, you'll be hearing things like augmentation. They want to augment the contract. They want to source out more money to make the price of the contract to be enough to be able to actually cater for inflations and other changes that are taking place over time. Now they're asking, what should be the right price that you should be talking for or seeking for the price of a bag of cement in that project? That is where you have to use this escalation formula that I showed you. And the escalation formula now, when you are now projecting the cost ratio over time, you need to bring in 3 different factors. One of the factors that you need to consider is, 1, you're bringing in your cost index ratio, which we already have here. And 2, you're going to add your inflation rate of inflation. But this is not just rate of inflation over time, it's rate of inflation annually. And then you have to imply the number of years that the inflation has taken place. I hope you got it up to this point. And the rest actually is self-explanatory. All right. So let me attend to another question and see what we can be able to do again this evening. I said, please, we need time to process this. QS, Christian Aljigo. Forgive me, you could have asked me to slow down. Maybe I was too fast. I am excited about talking about some of these things, because these are some of the things that we are not doing right. And it is only better that we start doing it right. When we start doing it right, we discover that we are masters of our own destiny. So let us find ways to doing it better and become better in what we do, even though we may be leveraging on some of these things. Some of these formulas, we did not invent them. but applying it is what makes us different and unique. QS Abari George says, do you have this topic in that textbook advertised in the afternoon? That is not really an advert, it's a book recommendation. You have some aspect of this, what we're talking about there, but you may not find this cost escalation there. You may find a different approach to it on the that textbook. But what we are giving it to you is raw. The things I'm giving to you is raw. You might not find it around in any textbook around you. So I encourage you to just get it as much as you can get here and then try it and see how it works out for you. Okay, let's do the last question and then know whether we are going to continue again this night or to wrap it up for the night. I have one from Alio here. He says, can you use average inflation cost index instead of picking the highest index when the increase runs over, for instance, 4 years? If I get you very well, he says, can you use average inflation cost index instead of picking the highest index when the inflation runs over? Now, what you have here, this is the average. This is basically the annual average. All right. What this means is that in every year, this is the total inflation that will be affecting everything, all costs in that very year. That's what this one means here now. Now, but here we have our inflation rates. Now, this inflation rate now, if I understand you very well, you are asking that can I use this one instead of going over to use this one? Now, the difference is this. This one is the aggregated inflation that has taken place over the time interval that we are considering, over the period. This is the inflation that has taken place. And the period that we're talking about is more than 1 year. All right. So if you use this one alone and do say divide by the number of years interval that you have in between, it will be giving you this figure. I try to demonstrate it here. It will give you this number, which is about 0.179 or 0.18. But that is not actually the true annual inflation rate. The true annual inflation rate, if you go by this formula, will give you about 0.11, which to me is more reasonable because there are other considerations that have been built in here. If you understand the concept of compound interest, that is what all this formula is all about. You can go and review it again. Compound interest. You understand? When you have to escalate and remove one and escalate. So just go and open that your textbook. Like I said, some of us will manage to escape. We are very happy that we escape statistics. We did not know that it is just somewhere waiting for us around the corner. Now we have approached that point again and we are confronted with it. So the best one is to tackle it headlong. We cannot do away with statistics because we'll always find usefulness of it at one point or the other. All right, that's for QS. Ali, I hope we got that information right. And if I did not answer it very well, you can say directly properly to be able to get what you say. QS Ademola Adewumi, he said, how do we get the book? I thought somebody said that the book is available at NIQS library. It's for sale. I think the last time I saw the price, it was about 10,000 naira. And maybe it will also be wise if you're not resident in Abuja or Lagos or anywhere where you can easily access the book. When you're sending in your money, also send in something for courier service so that it can mail it over to you. But it's quite useful. I guarantee that you have value for your money in that book. All right. That's for the questions that we have this evening. And another aspect that I want us to look at also this night before we wrap off for the night is under forecasting. Now, forecasting is similar to what we have done so far. The concept is the same, but the difference this time around is that we are using a different base information. All right. Now, the last time the information that we're using was from NBS, but when we are forecasting for exchange rates, the source of our information will not be the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. No, our go-to source of information will not be the Central Bank of Nigeria. So I have a sample of that. This thing opened up somewhere. Let me see if we can look at it again. Let me see CBN exchange rate. I also published the formula. This other one will be part of the things that will be sending out to everybody. So at every point in time when you feel like accessing this information by yourself, you can always use the website. I have them tabled out somewhere. Use the website and go and get the information by yourself or for yourself. Now, this is the Central Bank of Nigeria official website. And when you open the website, you actually see information basically about exchange rate informations. All right. They are telling you the going prices and stuff like that. Now, what we'll be doing in Power BI will be similar to what you have in this interface, but it will not go up to this extent. This is far advanced level. Ours is just to introduce the application so that you can always find your foot. If you're interested in learning more about it, you can then find ways or where you can get more knowledge on that. So this is basically the information that we're looking at. But the source of our information is when you scroll down a bit, you now see this one that says export exchange rate result in Excel or CSV. Now, this is the data that we need to exchange, download. And when you download it also, it will be similar like the one that we downloaded from Nigerian Bureau of Statistics or National Bureau of Statistics. Okay. So I just brought you here so that I will show you the information. So let's get back to our Excel and demonstrate that. Now, inside our Excel, this is the information that we're able to extract from that file that we downloaded. We're able to take it over to Power Query and we processed it. And this is how clean it has become. So actually now we have a lot of currencies. If you are observant, we have a lot of currencies that CBN is giving us their exchange rates. But the ones that we have interest more on is on the dollar, the euro, and the pound sterling. And then of course we have the different years that they were working. So the same way that we did when we were doing cost projections, we have our base year, which is 2015, and we have our current year, which is 2023. All right. Now, the cost of dollar, we're working with dollar this time around. The cost of dollar in 2025 was about 220 naira based on CBN exchange rates. And then don't take this information that I'm giving you because I've actually worked on some of this information. So it may not be actually the true reflection of what is contained in their website because I've processed them to be able to come up with what I have here today. So if I look at the two of them, if I want to know the ratio of change in foreign exchange, peradventure you are working on a project that you need to make some importations. And in 2015, when you bidded for the job, that will cost you about $500. Now you are supposed to make your delivery in 2023. How much should you be claiming as exchange for the inflation rate that has taken place? Because for you not to be able to secure foreign exchange to go and make that procurement, it will not cost you additionally. Before it was costing you about 202 naira, but now it's going to cost you a huge sum of 770 naira. So what should be the ratio? Now the ratio is the same that we just presented it before. The ratio will not be the current FX rate divided by the base FX rate. And when you do the margin between the two of them that we have here, it will give you about 3.881. So that simply means that if something was costing $500 as at 2015, in 2023, it will cost you roughly the equivalent of 1,906 naira. Okay? Now, this is the volume of naira that you need to use to be able to purchase something that was established in naira in 2015. Since you're going to be buying it in dollar, because the effect of this FX is only affecting only the one side of the component, which is the naira equivalent. So every other aspect of it that we did is the same, like what we have just done on the other place. All right. So time is fast spent. Okay, well, let me ask this question. How many of us knows about Power BI? Or who has heard about Power Query before? Power Query actually is part of Excel, and it has been around since way back as 2010. That's the first time it came around. I think I got to know about Power Query in 2013 or 14, but I didn't give it much attention. I did not know I was missing an important aspect of Excel up to now. I only got to start using Power Query in recent past. So for those of us who didn't know about it, we have been missing a lot actually. And this is another new place where quantity surveyors are finding relevance, data analytics, where you are looking at data and you're seeing the data the way they are breeding, and you're trying to give life to data. We may not go into the full detail of it spectrum, but then at least we introduce you so that we can start taking those baby steps, little waddling steps here and there. And if you have more interest, there are resources available on the internet. There are resources available all around you. There are training centers all around you. So you can always go and engage in any of them and achieve what you intend to achieve. So without wasting much of your time, I really appreciate your time. I so much thank you all for the rapt attention that you have given to me. We began, the highest number of attendants that we had in this evening conversation was about 103 or 4. And up till now, about 100 persons are still available. So I appreciate the attention that you have given, the commitment. I just hope that I did not fall your hand. And hopefully tomorrow we'll continue from where we left up with other aspects. We have just 2 aspects that we have remaining, which is the cash flow. An example of the cash flow is this. You may see this zigzag. It's actually showing that our payment is not coming every month. There is a time lag before we receive the next payment because of either delay in processing the payments or other things that were specified in our contracts conditions. What is called a period before honoring certificates. That is this gap that you're seeing here. So it will now be like a step. And then the other red line is actually the outflow, the amount of money that you actually spend in each cycle. When you know that your cash flow or your project is actually working healthily, is when your expense is always below your income. The region that you have here above is the region of your profits. So with that, I rest my case for the night. Thank you for all that you have done.
Wow. Another very, very powerful session delivered by QSCJ. Please don't say that again. You didn't fall our hands. In fact, we should be saying, if only that this is a webinar where we should have been doing boosters for you for the amazing presentation and all the knowledge you're impacting on us. From the few responses on the group, we can see that people are clamoring for, or people are positive for another session. We'll put a poll on the WhatsApp group and appreciate everybody's feedback so we can, take more of the house together, take everybody along while making a decision. But once again, QSCJ, you are amazing. Thank you for everything. Thank you for taking your time out to explain such a very complex, sounding very simple, but very complex part of data analytics that we take for granted. We really appreciate this, and we're looking forward to another session tomorrow where we discuss one very, very important session of quantity surveying, which is the cash flow analysis. I'm actually very excited to go through that session with everyone, and I hope that everyone else is as excited as I am. So without taking much of our time, again, thank you for keeping to time today so that we can all rest. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night's rest. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow, 8 a.m. Thank you.